Welcome to Fresh Eyes. This is Sal, Fresh Eyes. Um, and I want to start doing some videos. Um, and in this way, I'm jumping into this one. Had a conversation with my wife, and we're talking about the journey I went through. And it all hit me, and I start talking. I'm talking her ear off. And it's like, wow, this should be a video. Because this is what I want to give, natural conversations with thought, right? While it's in my head. I'm not a writing down person. Well, I guess I was before my eye issues. Now I can't even write it down because of the depth perception, but which is fine, right? But when I get it in my head and I start going on it, now's the time, right, to record. So I'm going to throw this one together. We're having a conversation. I'm talking about my journey and what I've seen in the church. Um, and I can only talk about my journey. I brought that up to my wife. My wife responded with, well, it sounds like it's my journey. You're focused on that on your side. I said, no, that's not the case. I get what she's saying because I'm very quick to point out when people sound like they're talking about themselves over the team, whether it be sports or whether it be even in this, that has taught me so much because um, it's all about the denial of self, right? It's so important in my coming to faith, understanding the faith, and developing that humility inside, but also the ability to understand others, and that has been so important. So she caught that, but it's not the reason I started that way. I start that way by saying, I can only speak through my journey, again, through the fresh eyes, why we're calling it that. But I say that because I don't want to ever come off as authority. There's nothing I'm an authority with, right? I know, I've gone to school for accounting, and I've worked in the corporate offices and been a manager, been a controller, been through that. I certainly know accounting and finance in the corporate world to a degree. Wouldn't consider myself an expert on anything, right? I think experts are really high standard to bring. Some football, some basketball, some baseball, some music, some other things. But you know, I when we're talking, when I'm making videos talking about this, there's so much more importance here in this topic on God than any other topic. So, what I want to make sure, especially when I'm talking about the church in this video, that I'm not an expert. I can only see through my eyes and what I've seen. I read a ton of books. I'm certainly not one that just stumbled in. I've been going to church all my life in the Catholic Church. I've stepped in churches. I've talked to priests. I had teachers who were priests. I went to 17 years of Catholic education, so I've been around it. But now, lately in my life, reading pastors and getting their ideas of churches and what it should be, and now feeling it as I go through it. And I have some issues from what I've seen. I don't want to say not complaints, because a lot of it's just, again, through my eyes that need to be seen through that angle, and that's what I'm trying to give you. I promise every video I won't be going through this, trying to give you my whole background on why, because I just don't want to come off as that authority. But here's what I've seen. I come to the faith very eager to learn, very eager to get mentors and to be discipled, right? I don't know where God's pulling me. I know He's pulling me, though. I don't know where, but I know He's pulling me. And my life has changed, through my disease in my eyes. So through my eyes, and I don't know where it's going. And perhaps it's going to a ministry of some type. I don't know. Is that going to be something I do? When I first came to faith, it was, I want to learn it for my family so I can preach to my family, or not preach, but so I can witness to my family and my friends. Share the good news, which I'm still doing. I think it's a big focus. But also, where's my life going? And I had a pastor friend of mine who was actually the one who baptized me. He brought it up early on, and then that's how I started going to online seminary that way. I didn't know, like, what role do I see myself in? Number one, I'm new to it. As far as reading the Bible and talking about the Bible, teaching the Bible, I'm reluctant because I'm new. And we also see in the scripture where it talks about bringing people new along slowly, right? Because, you know, I think the way it was worded is the devil, you know, Satan can take a hold of someone new and you know, use them to his advantage because they are new. I know that's part of it. I know a lot of the churches, when you come in as a new person, that's part of what they're thinking, and it's rightfully so. Right? You don't just, oh, this person's got a lot of desire for it, not of knowledge. Let's just hand him a ministry, right? Because that could go wrong, right? We have that you know, Satan uses that self-arrogance and pride when you know something, you know. And I don't find that I have a ton of it, but I definitely have it. We all have it, right? I have discussions with my family. It's like, well, you don't know this. Let me explain. You know, you get like that. You get, because it comes out of frustration, and so I can see that. So I want to come along slowly. But what I've seen in the churches that I've been involved with, the discipleship lacks something. Again, I can't speak to all churches. I only know a few. But it lacks something, right? It lacks a lane for someone like me to come in who's just so anxious to learn, not just about the Bible, but about theology, biblical theology. So it is centered on the Bible, of course. And have the ability, man, we should have, like, you know, in the Bible we see in the Old Testament and even in the New Testament, them meeting at the synagogues and they're having discussions, right? They do it reading, but then they have open discussions where they're talking about God and His Word and sharing their lives with each other, sure, and in the fellowship, but also talking about the Word, right? We put the Word is our authority. So we should be really breaking it down. And I understand that. You know, early on, I've had a few pastors tell me, well, you know, they can't give sermons necessarily going into all these theological points because they lose half or most of the church, right? The people come there to be fed in a certain way. We're all on different journeys. Some want to just come and worship and hear a little bit about the Word. That's it. Others want to press on. But there should be, I use the word lane. There should be room for that. And that was the discussion I had with my wife. There should be more room for that at churches, right? And, you know, early on I understood it like, well, you know, most of the church probably don't want to hear that, so I get it. But still, what if there's still, you know, I drive by these churches, and they're empty most nights, right? There's nothing going on, you know. And again, this is not a takedown of these churches, but have a room, have somebody in there, open, waiting to discuss this. Maybe they tried it before and it hasn't worked, but it still should be available for not just new believers, but you find, I mean, I'm learning even believers of many, many years haven't really dove into the Bible and into the Word that deeply to understand different theology points. But, you know, for me, it brings me closer to God, brings me closer to His Word. Not everybody needs to understand the differences between all these different theological terms. I'm not saying that, right? It's not gain knowledge equals salvation. We know that. But it helps, it enlightens me, it edifies me, you know, to learn more from different people that have more experiences, being pointed to books and sermons, and, you know, and luckily in this age we have the internet and I have my phone. I've learned so much from some of the great pastors, not just living, but even passed away. We have access to so much. I mentioned that in my first video. So it's there, but you feel kind of alone, right? You can't do it on your own. Again, another thing I talked about my own in my last video was about joining a church. I know how important it is, but I'm going slower on that process simply because I want to do it right, but I also want to take you along for the journey. But I have that need, right, to get out there. But even in my own life, like I started the video, my journey, where am I going, right? Like I said, the pastor mentioned a few months ago, like, hey, this might be your new life, right? This might be how you do it, how you know, it'll never be for money, but this might be how you feed your family now. This might be the path God's putting you on because of your eyes, but He's given you the passion for the Word to teach and talk about it. And that's awesome, right? But where, you know, I meet a lot of these churches and I watch sermons and I hear them saying, you should understand, you know, you want to understand the Bible Ask the Holy Spirit. He will open it. And if he's indwelt in you, you will start to understand it, right? When you pick up the word. I've experienced that in my life. I read the Bible as a kid or at other times and, didn't understand it as much as I do now in my current setting. And that's not just from reading it, right? There's an element of the Spirit, asking and praying for the Spirit to open your heart. But if you do that, then yeah, you don't need the preacher, right? That's what I heard. This was during a sermon, one of my favorite preachers. And he said that, yeah, you can go home and understand it yourself, right? Open a church is what he said. Start a church, because that's what we need. That's what I'm getting to. And I see that so much, this idea of this is what we need. We need new leaders or pastors or preachers or teachers or whatever the case may be. I'm not putting myself in any of those categories. I have no idea, right? I know I enjoy talking about the word, being involved in discussions about it. But, I definitely don't know the exact lane, but I don't see, well, in my short time, I don't see this being part of discipleship programs. And yes, I take it on me. Maybe it's me. I try to jump ahead, right? That's me. That's part of me. Or I get, I had this discussion with my wife, man. Satan will try to mess us up, right? He will try to divert us, and he'll use in us our flaws, right? Which I have many, which we all have many, but he'll use that. And one of my flaws all my life has been, I use the word turned off, so I use it here. It's the way I talk, but I get turned off quickly if something, I don't want to say goes my way, because a lot of it's not about I don't think I'm that type that wants my name in the lights or any kind of grand, but if we decide, I'm very much, hey, if we talk about how we're going to do something and we discuss it, we agree upon it, when it starts, when the lights go on and we start this, when it don't go that way, I get a little discouraged. It's like, man, didn't we talk about this? Like, then I start to, and this is Satan, like starting to think about what's the real, what's going on behind the scenes here, right? And then my mind kind of goes with it, and I will then pull back from things. I found myself doing that, right? I have done that, even in my brief time, and I want to get over that. I know that part's me, but on the flip side, I do believe that churches are lacking in discipleship. There should be more opportunity, more lanes. There should be more pastors who are very much willing to give up their time to talk about a book of the Bible. Let's break it down. You interested in it? Let's meet on this day. Let's meet regularly. Let's go over it. Don't put myself in other people's lives. I understand people have lives, even the pastors that I talk to. They have their own lives, and they have things going on, and different aspirations of their own careers, whether it be in the church and ministry. And I'm not saying that they're about their careers either. They're true. Almost every pastor, I know they have a true heart for the word and for God. But sometimes we miss that, and I see it in my journey, right? And I don't, I'm looking for that, and I don't find it. We should have. It shouldn't just be, hey, like, someone comes to me and wants to learn about accounting. It shouldn't just be, hey, there's a college right there. Just go get your degree. And no, that's not the only way to learn. And for me, I've been taught that because of my eyes. I can't take regular tests. I tried the online seminary, which I haven't given up on, but I don't know if that's the right path. I learned by reading, actually listening to books, audio books, Kindle audio, whatever it may be. I learned that way, and then by discussing, where I could really kind of wrap my head. I have these long conversations with friends that, but I only have a few. Like I think that there needs to be forums for that. Perhaps that's one of the callings. And I mentioned this with, like I said, again, we just had this discussion, my wife, the reason I'm making this video. And she said, well, I'm sure the church has tried this and maybe nobody shows up. That's fine, but then the church shouldn't be dark on a lot of those nights. There should be someone just there waiting for a discussion. There should be a forum for this. People could come and ask questions, and we could break down the Bible and bring in, if it's a Greek scholar, or a Hebrew scholar, or someone more familiar with the concepts of Judaism and first century Judaism. Whatever the case may be, historians and whatever, we should have that opportunity, and I don't see it, at least in my short time, and it's something perhaps that is part of the calling. Um, I don't know, right? That's the funny thing about calling. You know your call, and you're trying to find it. You're trying to listen for God's voice, and you hear it in your prayer. Perhaps I need to pray more. Perhaps I need to reach out more, go to more churches myself, right? Because I know that's a lacking in my own doing. Perhaps God's putting that on my heart, even through these podcasts and to make this video. But I had the passion. We were talking about it. And it's not, like I said, I'm not making a video to complain. I just wanted to put this on a video because we were having this discussion with my wife, and I don't know if this is something I see. Maybe it's more of me. Maybe other people see this. Maybe this is a wake-up call, and maybe it's leading me to the calling that I say earlier that I can't find. But I think there should be that. I think pastors should have that. Should have that heart to always want to meet and talk about a book of the Bible. Even if they've done it a million times, that should be the reason they're doing it. That should be the reason they're doing it. And certainly, like I said, I have to put myself in other people's shoes to live their lives. But man, I hope if I ever have a role like pastor or teacher, Bible teacher, or in whatever ministry, that I never lose the heart and the desire that I have now to talk about it. I don't want to be a teacher so I can show them what I know. And that was part of me not wanting to join a seminary early on, and I got inspired reading a book by Chuck Smith, who I like, a late pastor, the guy who began the Calvary Chapel movement. But he was talking about we don't need more, people to go to Bible school and get their degree. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's not a statement against degrees. I'm certainly one who got my degree in accounting and financing, my master's and all this stuff. But so it's not a put down of education, but that's the world, right? We see in the Bible that this is not of the world, right? It's not the same thing. Sometimes it seems like we try to tie this back into worldly terms. Like, we need a degree, we need a piece of paper. I got to prove to you through these papers that I know the word, that I could teach. No, I felt strongly I didn't want to do that, but I did find the online seminary that I was put on by a pastor, and it's different, right? It works with my eyes because we can have discussions, and it worked to a degree. But sometimes I feel a pull to, I feel God's hand on my life, and it's always on my life, but I feel His providence, and I want to follow through, and I feel that I don't want to necessarily do the old way that I've done all my life, where I could show you my degrees, and I got news for you. All those degrees I got in accounting, when I walked into a job for the first time and second time, and the many jobs I've had, it gives you a basic understanding maybe of debits and credits and things of that nature. You had to learn the place, right? I mean, you basically were put back on your back and having to learn again. So sometimes, that was just a degree to show people, hey, he could show up. He could go to school every day, and he could do certain things to get his degree. He could get good grades. It wasn't practical. And when I became a manager, I learned when I hired people. Sometimes the practical experience is much more important than what they learned on their own. So I feel compelled to do it that way. But I just wish there was more opportunity, and I'm hoping I see that. So I wanted to make this video talking about that, that there should be, right? It shouldn't be all about, hey, you talk to a preacher or a pastor, and it's like, you feel like they're trying to set you up to try to just come to their church. Not set you up in a bad way. I mean, the whole conversation is aimed to just adding another number to their church. It should be to, hey, God's calling this person. He's got desire. Let me help him, or let me point him to where he can get help. I just feel like that should be there. I didn't want to make this video early on because I don't want it to sound like that, but I felt it on my heart. And that's kind of what I want this channel to be. Again, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope this sparks conversation, and I hope I could follow up on this. And I will follow up on this and tell you where God has taken me and where I was right and wrong in these early videos. I know there's a ton I've said that I'm not seeing it yet. I know that. But thanks for listening. May God's peace and grace be with you all through Jesus. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you soon again on the Fresh Eyes podcast. Thank you.